With only 2 episodes left in the Testament Season 1, there's one question I keep coming back to in particular. What will finally break Agnes? Because this entire season has really been about watching Agnes, or of course Hannah, grow up inside of Gilead, slowly lose the innocence of girlhood. She's not just surviving the ways of Gilead, but very carefully and deliberately being shaped by it. We've watched her experience friendship, growing up, first love, betrayal, abuse, power, indoctrination, and now she's being pushed towards marriage. It feels like every single pressure point in her life is starting to collide at once. And the thing is, Agnes is standing at a really dangerous crossroads right now, because she could easily still become someone who adapts to Gilead, or she could become someone who finally sees it clearly enough to turn against it. So today, I want to break down where I think Agnes's storyline is heading by the end of season 1, what major moments I think are still coming in these final episodes, and why I think the show has been building towards a massive psychological shift for her all season long. Welcome to Screen Coven. We've been expecting you. Hi everyone. Thank you so much for joining me today. So I started this video off with the intention of covering every character and where I thought the storylines might go, also maybe an update on Mayday, different things like that. But then I realized after speaking about Agnes and also kind of looping Becca's storyline into Agnes's a little bit because, clearly they just really intersect, I realized that this video was already over 20 minutes long. So we're going to be doing multiple parts, and today's video starts with Agnes, because arguably, she is the reason this entire story exists. There wouldn't really be a reason to return to this world if it wasn't for her. We already know what June went through trying to get her daughter out of Gilead in the Handmaid's Tale. And now here we are. Hannah has grown up inside of it. She's still there. She's Agnes now. And what's so fascinating about this season is that we're not just watching her as a victim of Gilead, or even just as someone surviving it. We're watching her actually be shaped by it. We're watching girlhood inside of Gilead in a way that feels almost soft at times, almost normal, which is exactly what makes it so unsettling when you step back and remember where she actually is. Because Agnes is getting moments of friendship and first crushes and these small pieces of adolescence that almost feels like they could belong in any other story. Except they don't. They exist inside of this very controlled, very constructed version of what girlhood is supposed to look like inside of Gilead. And in this first season of The Testaments, it's really been about that tension between what Agnes has been taught to believe and what she's slowly starting to feel underneath it. We're watching her become heightenedly aware of the system she's in, but not fully rejecting it yet. She still responds to it. She still defers to it in so many ways. And then there are these little moments where you can see her instincts start to shift, where she starts pushing against things, even if she doesn't fully understand it yet. And episode 8 was an extremely good example of that, because now she's being prepared for marriage to Commander Weston. And for the first time, she's being put into a position where she's told she has a choice. She gets to pick the wedding cake, the flowers, these small details that are supposed to represent her becoming a wife. And Weston is presenting it in a way that feels almost reassuring, like she's stepping into something stable, something structured, something that will finally give her a defined place. And what's really important here is Agnes's reaction to it, because she doesn't really know how to exist in that kind of freedom. She immediately defers to Paula, whatever Paula thinks is right, because that's what she's been conditioned to do. Let someone else decide. But when Commander Weston interrupts that pattern, he tells her that this is her decision, not Paula's, but Agnes's. And in that moment, something shifts. Even if it's small, Agnes chooses the calla lilies, and Weston reinforces it. He supports it, and he even tells Paula that Agnes made her choice. That moment matters so much more than it seems, because it's the first time that Agnes experiences power, not as something she's punished for, or something she has to survive, but something that is actually being handed to her. And that is where things get complicated. Because now she's not just being controlled, she's being invited into control. She's being shown a version of Gilead where she has agency, but only inside of the system that already exists. And that puts her at a really interesting crossroads, because she could go in one of two directions from here. She could start to lean into that power and find safety or identity in it, and potentially become someone who begins to adapt to the system in a more permanent way. Or this could be the beginning of her realizing that even this version of her choice is still happening inside of a cage. And right now, she's not fully either of those things. She's somewhere in the middle, which is exactly why her storyline feels so unstable heading into the final 2 episodes. Because something still has to tip her. And I don't think it's going to be just one thing. I think it's going to be multiple things stacking on top of each other until it becomes too unavoidable. As we saw in episode 8, the first major one is Dr. Grove, because what happened there and what she's now beginning to understand through Hulda's experience, it's not just a personal violation. It's not just something that she can pretend didn't happen. It's not something that just happened to her specifically. It's the beginning of a much larger realization that this is not isolated. It's a part of how the system functions. And even when she tries to get help in Aunt Lydia and Aunt Vidala, 2 of the people who are supposed to protect these girls at all cost, they're gaslighted and turned away. And that shift is so important, because that's when trauma stops being individual and starts becoming structural. But even with that, she hasn't fully broken away from Gilead yet, because there are still emotional anchors holding her in place. And one of the biggest ones right now is Becca. And Becca is where things start to get even more complicated. I mentioned at the start of this video that there are going to be some spoilers. Again, I have no idea what's actually going to happen in these final 2 episodes. These are all purely theories, but I am pulling from examples in the book. So this next part about Becca is something that I haven't covered in any other video yet, mostly because I felt like it was a little too big to try to give away so early on in the season. But now that we're here discussing the end, it's time. The show certainly seems to be echoing what Becca's situation is in the novel. She's being pushed into a marriage that she doesn't want. She's losing control over her future, and she's emotionally entangled in ways that make everything more volatile. And now that we have the episode description for episode 10, it says that Becca will face consequences for her actions. And that wording is really important, because it's not vague in a harmless way. It's vague in a loaded way. It doesn't say she gets punished for speaking out, as the episode 8 description did about Hulda. And it doesn't say she's being accused of something. It specifically says the consequences of her actions, which means she does something. And that opens up a lot of possibilities. In the novel and the show alike, we know Dr. Grove, Becca's dad, is a horrible person. In the novel, Dr. Grove had been abusing Becca her whole life. In the show, they have not specifically addressed this. I think it's very likely to assume that this is the case. So as I was saying, the novel and the show are both somewhat mirrors of Becca's situation. In both storylines, Becca is set to marry a young teenage commander. And in both storylines, she's not dealing with it well. We also know that she has intense feelings for Agnes. And of course, those feelings are incredibly forbidden in Gilead. In the novel, Becca has a really hard time dealing with this, and she ends up trying to hurt herself. Thankfully, she is saved, and a very interesting storyline comes out of it that I'm really excited to hopefully be getting into in season 2, but I won't get into that too much right now. So as I was saying, Becca tries to hurt herself in the book. And of course, I think it's pretty likely that it could happen in the show as well, given the mental state that Becca has clearly been in. And if she does try to do something, this would have to cause extreme emotional trauma for Agnes. Becca is her best friend, and anything happening to her would be devastating. And we also know from the trailers that we have seen, the one that we were originally given for the first season of the Testaments. So we see this scene of Becca clearly being taken away. Something that I think is weird to point out about this is the fact that everyone here is fully in black clothing. You can't see their faces. That's not something that is super typical in the Handmaid's Tale series. If she was being taken away by guards, they typically wouldn't be having their faces covered. So, this scene in particular does make me wonder if they're misleading us somehow. Could these people be completely covered because they're trying to conceal themselves because they're actually Mayday? Could one of these actually be Agnes or the other girls? I'm sure everyone's in just kind of like hunched positions and stuff, but if you're really looking at this here, nobody appears to be that much bigger than Becca. And if these really were guardian men, I would probably expect most of them to be towering over her a little bit more in this situation. So, anyway, something to point out there. However, I'm not saying that I don't think something doesn't happen to Becca. I think it clearly does. And it's proven to us in that episode 10 description, as I mentioned. And I think it maybe is also proven to us here in this other quick flash that we got in the trailer. In an earlier video that I did about this, I mentioned that I just felt like it was really unclear to tell who it is here. And to be honest, I still don't feel like this looks that much like Becca, but it's horrible lighting. It's very quick, and she's in completely different clothing than we've seen her in so far this series. So that could explain why it just isn't really clicking to me. But since we only have 2 episodes left, and we know something is happening to Becca, and we're seeing her being taken away by someone, it really leads me to believe that this has to be her. And there's another detail here. If you look at her wrist, she clearly has something on it, like a bandage or something. And we even saw that scene where Aunt Lydia was on the other side of the bars yelling at someone saying that, these are unnecessary, take them off. And she was pointing at her wrists, but implying, whoever she was talking about that was behind the bars. So, this indication of Becca having something on her wrists, I think, is hinting towards the storyline that happened in the novel, and that we are going to be seeing this play out in the series as well. But I'm also wondering if the twist that we're going to get on this story is that Agnes and Daisy and possibly Garth or other girls will actually be assisting in getting Becca out somehow. In the novel, Aunt Lydia sees Becca suffering, and she obviously doesn't want that for her. So Aunt Lydia invites Becca to come live at Ardua Hall and train to be an aunt. I think this could be a really cool story for season 2, and if this season ends in any way that hints at that happening, I will definitely be making more videos about it. However, something just tells me that things might be a little bit different here. And how cool would it be if, for some awful reason, Becca was being punished in some horrific way for something she did, and her friends, Garth, Agnes, Daisy, maybe Shunammite as well, or Hulda, somebody, they come in and save her. I think that would be a really cool twist on the story, and I would love to see that happening at the end of the season. I also think it could lead to so many more storylines going forward. I mean, we have to think about what's going to happen in season 2, right? So if somehow Becca were to get out, were to join June, think about the possibilities. Okay, like I said, I'm definitely going to be making a video here in the next coming weeks about what we think will happen for season 2. I'm just going to wait until, the finale comes out of the first season, of course, so that we know how that ended and can provide a little bit more accurate predictions for season 2. So if that kind of content is something you'd be interested in watching, please make sure you subscribe to my channel so that you'll be notified when it comes out. Even though I do think that this storyline we just discussed is a very likely option for how season 1 will end for Becca, I also like to discuss any possible option that could happen. I like to give you guys any theory and see what you think, see what other theories you might have, because that's the fun of this, right? None of us really know what's going to happen. So, as a couple other options that I was thinking about, one, Becca obviously has a lot of trauma in her life, as we discussed, because of her father. And in episode 8, when Agnes was speaking with Aunt Lydia, and she was trying to confirm with Aunt Lydia that what Hulda said about Dr. Grove was true, that she knows it's true. She basically left that conversation feeling blown off by Aunt Lydia, feeling gaslit by her. But we heard in Agnes's narration that she didn't understand at the time that Aunt Lydia was telling her that Dr. Grove would be dealt with. I don't think that they would give us this piece of information if they weren't planning on finishing this storyline in season 1. So that has me believe that Dr. Grove is going to be dealt with sometime in the next 2 episodes. Likely the next episode. If and when that does happen, it's very unsurprising that that would be the final notch, if you will, to push Becca to just do something really extreme. So, of course, that could still be her harming herself, but it also could be something that could be inflicting harm on others. I do think it would be kind of an interesting twist if she does just decide to go rogue. What do you guys think that she's gonna do? Let me know in the comments. Will she do something that could actually potentially jeopardize some of her friends? Or will it be more directed at her father or someone in authority? And then the final option that I was considering is that we know how intense Becca's feelings are for Agnes, and it's quite possible that Becca does not like boys at all. In a time of distress, perhaps an interaction with another girl happens, and someone in Gilead sees that, which leads to her being punished. So, whether Becca's breaking point comes from an internal collapse or external punishment almost becomes secondary because it's the impact on Agnes that we're watching the most from a narrative standpoint. Becca just might end up being the final emotional push that takes everything that's been building underneath Agnes and forces it to the surface. And another way that I think the show is going to end season 1 in a way that is going to push Agnes not necessarily into full rebellion yet, but into something irreversible. Because while all of this is a lot, at this point, Agnes has dealt with losing her childhood, losing her first love and crush to be married to her best friend. Potentially, her best friend now will be hurt in some way. And she's been dealing with the emotional distress of Dr. Grove. I don't think it's quite enough. I think something else is going to happen, and it will be one of the biggest reveals, if not the biggest reveal, for the end of season 1. I think something will happen that will finally connect the dots between Agnes and June, because the show has been very deliberate in the way it keeps layering her identity under everything else. We've seen it in Agnes's file. When the aunts were looking at commanders, they referenced her origin. We've seen Paula's language about her genetics, and we've seen the institutional awareness that her real identity is not actually as hidden as it once was. And we even saw all the way back in The Handmaid's Tale, one of those final moments where we did see Agnes in the series. We saw her writing her name Hannah on a drawing. So we knew in The Handmaid's Tale that she remembered at least in some way who she used to be. And we've gotten such small moments of it here in the Testaments. But it's not enough. We need the reveal. We need the rupture. And I think that's what episode 10 is building towards. Not just a plot ending for the season, but a psychological shift in who Agnes is allowed to be going forward. And I think it will happen in a way that does seem subtle. It could be that something happens with Mayday. June is at the forefront of it, and somehow that storyline converges with Agnes's. It could be we learn that at some point in her training, Daisy learned that June's daughter's name is Hannah. And perhaps Agnes reveals to Daisy that her real name is Hannah. And in that moment, we realize that Daisy finally realizes that this is June's daughter. Or perhaps it will follow the novel a little bit more closely. And Aunt Lydia will actually be the one to reveal this information to Agnes. Either way, by the time we get to the end of this season, Agnes is not going to be the same person she is right now. Too many pressures are converging all at once, and I don't think it's going to take very long for her to erupt. I mentioned at the start of this video that I'm going to be breaking down how I think the ending of season 1 will end in different character episodes. So, of course, this one has been about Agnes and a bit about Becca. And then the next one that I've started on that I'm hoping to release within the coming days will be about Daisy. And I think Daisy is certainly headed for the most dramatic of conclusions. So I'm really excited to get into her story with you all. Like I mentioned, please stay tuned. That will be out shortly as well. But for the purpose of this video, I need to discuss something about Daisy that will intersect with Agnes a little bit. And I'll get into this more in detail in my Daisy video, but here's a little teaser. In one of the trailers, we saw a scene that we definitely have not seen yet in the series where June is speaking with Daisy and she's really upset with her. And she's basically telling her, like, you are not going to compromise our mission. I will do anything to get my daughter back. Don't mess with this, you know? And I think now that we're 2 episodes away from the ending, we can very logically summarize what is happening here. This information about Dr. Grove sends Daisy into a fury. She acts on that in some way that jeopardizes Mayday, jeopardizes everything they've worked for. And somehow, I don't know if they've managed to, get Daisy out for a moment or just bring June into Gilead, but somehow June had to come in and meet with Daisy and yell at her, put her in her place because she's jeopardizing the mission and she's acting like an idiot. I have so many thoughts on what I think Daisy is going to do, but like I said, that is being saved for the Daisy video. So if you want to hear more about that, please stay tuned. Please subscribe to my channel so that you'll be notified when it does come out. Also, it means a lot to me. I really thank you. So I mentioned this scene for a couple of different reasons. One, because I think that this is a very high indicator that when this scene happens, it's either going to reveal or lead to that reveal that I was speaking of, where Daisy learns Agnes is really Hannah, June's daughter. It feels to me like that's inevitable. It's gonna happen. But another reason I mentioned this is because, I think that there's an option here that we're completely overlooking because fans of the show, like myself, are just so focused on getting Hannah out of Gilead, reunited with June, and having that amazing story. And heck, if Daisy is meeting with June, then it almost feels more likely to happen than ever before. But wouldn't that just be so easy? And such a lovely story, giving us probably what we all want, just wrapped in a nice little package with a bow. But no, I don't think so. The Handmaid's Tale series loves to piss us off, okay? And I mean that in the best way, right? Like, how many episodes do you watch and leave filled with absolute rage? And not because it's poor writing, but because of what these characters are doing, of what Gilead is doing to people, to characters that we love. It's horrific to watch, even traumatic at times. And I think we've seen something really interesting this season. It's something that I mentioned earlier on in this video. Agnes is at a point where she could really go 2 different ways from here. She could let all of these horrific experiences of Gilead break her in ways that lean her more towards the Serenas and the Paulas of the world, or radically push her the other way towards the likes of her mom, June. And I know this is a controversial thing to bring up. I mean, I adore Agnes's character, as I know many of you do too. And if she just suddenly became like Serena or Paula and started loving the power of Gilead, that would piss a lot of people off. But it would also be a really good twist to the story. And it would extend the story because suddenly Agnes wouldn't be the character we're watching who we love and just want to see succeed. She would be the character that we're suddenly disgusted by and unsure about and feel conflicted with because we've watched her grow up and we've wanted amazing things for her. And now, who is she becoming? Agnes will marry Commander Weston. I don't know that we're going to see it before the end of season 1. I actually think it's very unlikely we're going to see her wedding happening before the end of season 1. But I do think that we've been given glimpses, like in the situation where Agnes is choosing the calla lilies, which Paula doesn't want, and Weston stands up for her and enforces her power. I think she likes it, and I think she can grow to like it even more. We know that Agnes, at least at the start of this series, while she clearly has never been 100% for Gilead, she was excited to get married. She was excited to have babies. There is a future for her, and I'll emphasize this again because it's extremely important. There is a very powerful future ahead of her. And what is she giving that up for if she leaves Gilead? To be just a normal teenage girl? I mean, when Daisy was talking about being a teenager, going through the triumphs of love and life, Agnes said, that sounds awful. You guys, I'm not trying to support Agnes staying in Gilead. I want her to get out, trust me. I think that there's, an entire life for her and she needs to experience freedom and being a teenager. But I am here to give you all the different options and theories, and sometimes those theories are going to be controversial. So, what if all of this time we have been so focused on getting Agnes out of Gilead that we never bothered to ask ourselves, does she even want to leave? And there's something that feels so real about this that there could be a moment where suddenly she is confronted by June. And there's a very quick moment where she could leave and she chooses not to. Because you guys, we have to remember that Agnes was 5 years old when she was taken. Gilead is her entire life. It's all she knows. It is her home. And while that decision might not make any sense to us as a viewer, it completely would make sense for Agnes. And like I said, that would be a really wild twist on the story. I don't think that would be endgame, but it would help to extend this story, another season or two if she's conflicted. Another thing I want to talk about just briefly is the fact that Agnes is marrying Commander Weston. Okay, yeah, we know this, duh. But my point here is that here's where I bring up something else from the book. In the Testament's novel, Commander Judd, that guy that was working with Aunt Lydia from the beginning, part of the Sons of Jacob, who looks just like Fred, horrible. He is the one that Agnes is actually set to be married to. And what we know about Commander Judd in the novel is that he poisons off all of his wives when he feels that they are past their prime so that he can have a new, younger wife. And after Agnes marries him, she starts to become ill. Aunt Lydia grows suspicious and helps her, finds a way to get her out of it. And for some reason, obviously, I think just for complexity, the television series has decided to, let's say, split Commander Judd's character. Commander Judd does exist. He does have a wife, Penny, who is currently ill, and very likely that could be because she's being poisoned. But then we've also got Commander Weston, who is actually controlling the eyes and is actually the one who is going to be marrying Agnes now. So, in terms of what is actually happening here, is this storyline from the book being carried out? It's a little hard to say. We've got Penny who is sick, who really does seem like maybe she could be being poisoned. And I think that we'll find out in the coming episodes what her fate is. And I also think that this ties into something that I'm really excited to talk about with Daisy. So please, please watch my Daisy video when it comes out, because it's a pretty juicy theory. So, anyways, Commander Weston is going to be marrying Agnes, and we do know that before Gilead, he had a couple DV charges against him, but they were dropped. And then, of course, in Gilead, we know his first wife passed. And when he was speaking with Agnes about it, he very clearly said that it was the worst day of his life when he lost his child, not losing his wife, who he also lost that same day in childbirth. Just the child. He didn't really care about the wife. So just remember that, and I'm sure you all are fully aware of this because none of these commanders are actually good men. But just be aware that, even though Commander Weston is coming off almost charming in a way, I mean, he's pushing Agnes to make her own decisions. He's acting like he's just so excited to be with her and is trying to be somewhat respectful, I guess, as respectful as Gilead can be. He's nothing even close to being a good man. And so, again, I don't think we're going to see the wedding happen at all before the end of the season. So, whether or not Commander Weston actually does try to poison Agnes and that becomes part of the storyline, let's see what happens at the end of season 1. Then we'll make our speculations. But I will say that I think this poisoning storyline is going to be there for either Weston or Judd. It's just kind of a matter of which one right now. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments. And then the last point that I wanted to talk about today, because I know you're all dying to find out, what will happen between Garth and Agnes? Well, I think this is a really short and sweet answer. I do think that before the end of the season, we're going to see them kiss. There's no way they didn't start, the very first episode with Agnes talking about how when she was punished for flirting with a boy when she was a kid, and she wonders what would happen if she ever kissed one. I don't think that line would have been in the first episode if it wasn't at least kind of sweetly hinting at what will happen at the end of the season. She'll get her first kiss to Garth. And of course, it will be very forbidden and reminiscent of June and Nick. And yeah, so I'm really excited about this part. I do think it's probably going to be in like a moment of severe trauma. That's just kind of what it seems like to me. We see Agnes, crying, upset. We know something happens with Becca. So it kind of makes sense to me. She's just like emotional and vulnerable, and Garth is there for her, and it happens. But who knows? Maybe they'll create some sort of a sweet moment. I think I'm just kind of emotionally preparing myself for a very intense final 2 episodes to this season. And of course, why is it going to be emotional? Well, I think Daisy sets all of that into motion. So stay tuned for the Daisy episode. I'll see you guys next time. Thank you so much for joining me. And remember, the Coven is always watching.